My name is Elaine, and at 55, I find myself in the sterile quietude of a hospital room, the IV drip a constant reminder of the battle I'm facing, cancer. The cold touch of the sheets is a stark contrast to the warmth I used to feel at home, now a distant memory. 15 years have lapsed since I walked down the aisle to George, a widower with a bright-eyed daughter, Mia. She was 10, all pigtails and toothy smiles, eagerly accepting me not just as her father's wife, but as a mother in spirit. She became the daughter I never had, the unexpected joy in a marriage I thought would fill the pages of my life with love and companionship. George was a man of stature, a businessman whose allure was as much about his charisma as it was the way he seemed ready to build a new life with me. But time has a way of eroding facades, and his once tender patience gave way to relentless demands. I'd trudge home from my job as a financial analyst, a role that demanded precision and left little room for error, only to find a second shift awaiting me. A test of my domestic diligence I was bound to fail in his eyes. I remember his exacting standards, the way he'd scrutinize the dinner table. "Elaine, is this the best you could do?" he'd ask, barely looking at the carefully prepared dishes before him. His words were like weights, each one piling on until I felt I could barely stand. Yet I continued to cook, clean, and care for him, even when my body screamed for rest. My parents, God bless them, would often tell me, "Elaine, you need to take care of yourself too." But their advice would fall on deaf ears. I was too caught up in the cycle of appeasement. It's during one of these silent meals that my cell phone vibrates, startling me from my thoughts. It's Mia. Her voice is a balm to my tired spirit. "Mom, how are you holding up?" I try to sound stronger than I feel. "I'm hanging in there, sweetie. How are you?" She's silent for a beat too long, and I know she's carrying a weight too heavy for her young shoulders. "I'm worried about you, Mom. Dad, he doesn't seem to care." Her words are a punch to the gut, but not unexpected. George's absence in these sterile white walls has been as loud as the blips on the monitors beside me. "Mia, love, I know. It's okay. We have each other," I say, the words tasting like a mix of sadness and resolve. There's a pause, and then her voice, laced with a quiet strength, comes through. "We do, and I'm here, every step of the way. Don't worry about Dad. Worry about getting better." Her reassurance is the anchor I didn't know I needed. When she visits, we don't talk about George, or the cold dinners, or the way his eyes no longer held any warmth for me. Instead, we talk about her job, the books she's reading, the life she's building. Her resilience and independence make me proud, and I cling to the fact that I played some part in shaping the incredible woman she's become. I lie back, closing my eyes as Mia's promises echo in my mind. The hospital room feels less confining somehow, as if her words have breathed life into its corners. I am not alone, and that's a thought worth holding on to. The day starts before the sun peeks over the horizon, my alarm clock a relentless foe. I'm up, pulling on the clothes I laid out the night before, my movements as automatic as the coffee maker that sputters to life in the kitchen. George is still asleep, the rise and fall of his chest the only evidence of life. At work, the numbers and spreadsheets are a welcome distraction. They don't complain, they don't demand, they just exist in their black and white cells, waiting for me to make sense of them. My colleagues are another story, buzzing around with office gossip and weekend plans. "Elaine, you've got to come out with us one of these Fridays," Janet from accounting says, popping her head into my cubicle. I manage a smile, though I can't remember the last time I had plans that didn't involve George or a grocery list. "Thanks, Janet. Maybe next time." She gives me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before buzzing off to her next conversation. Home again, the routine continues. I'm chopping vegetables for the stew George likes when he walks in, early from work. His mood's a toss-up. I brace myself for whatever version of him is coming through the door. "Smells good," he says, which feels like a small victory. I let out the breath I've been holding. "It should be ready in about an hour," I respond, keeping my tone even. He grunts, disappearing into the living room. The TV comes to life, and I'm left alone in the kitchen with the carrots and potatoes. I find comfort in the rhythm of my knife against the cutting board, a simple, predictable sound. Later, we sit across from each other at the dining table, a chasm of unsaid words between us. He's scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging the meal. "It's good," he mumbles after a few minutes, but there's a distance in his voice that's become all too familiar. I nod, my own phone lighting up with a text from Mia. "Thinking of you, Mom. Hope dinner went well." I type back a quick, "Love you," and slip the phone back into my pocket. George looks up, eyes narrowing. "Was that Mia?" "Yeah, just checking in," I say, trying to keep the conversation light. He nods, going back to his phone, and we finish dinner in silence. I clean up, the clinking of dishes filling the empty air. Tomorrow will be the same, the grind wearing away like waves on a cliffside, constant and relentless. But tonight, Mia's message is a lifeline, a reminder that not everything is as cold and unforgiving as this routine. There's warmth there, love, and it's enough to keep me going for one more day. The hospital room's constant beeps and murmurs are background noise as I'm lost in thought. It's during one of these quiet moments that Mia walks in, her face etched with worry. I can tell she's bearing a weight, the kind that's ready to topple over. She pulls a chair close to my bed, takes my hand, and sighs deeply. "Mom, there's something you should know," she begins, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. I squeeze her hand, encouraging her to continue. "What is it, Mia?" "It's about Dad," she pauses, gathering her thoughts. He has someone else." The words hang heavily between us. I had felt the presence of someone in our lives, an invisible intruder, but hearing it confirmed sends a chill through me. "He introduced her to me, Mom," Mia's voice cracks, "as his future wife." The air feels thick, like I'm breathing through cotton. I try to absorb the shock, to maintain some sense of composure for Mia's sake, but inside, I'm reeling. "When?" The word comes out as a whisper. "Last week. He told me he was serious about her," Mia replies, her eyes not leaving mine, a silent apology in her gaze. There's a long pause as I process this betrayal. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart," I manage to say at last. "How long have you known?" "Just a few days," she admits. "I didn't want to upset you, but I thought it's better you hear it from me." The dull hum of the hospital seems to fade into silence. I'm grateful for her honesty, yet the pain is sharp, unyielding. I nod, feeling an odd sense of calm amidst the turmoil. "We'll deal with this," I say, more to convince myself than to reassure her. Mia leans forward, resting her forehead against our clasped hands. "I'm here for you, Mom, whatever you need." I draw a deep breath, my mind already turning. My husband's betrayal is a deep cut, but I won't let it be the end of my story. There's a plan forming, a way out of the mess he's made. And in this sterile hospital room, with my stepdaughter by my side, I feel the first stirrings of a future where I am no longer in the shadows of a loveless marriage. I will rise from this, with a cunning that's been honed by years of quiet observation. George may have underestimated me, but he'll soon learn that's his mistake. I look at Mia, her strength becoming my own. "Let's start planning," I say, and there's a new determination in my voice. Our bond, unbroken by the lies that surround us, is the foundation we'll build upon. And as Mia smiles, a small, fierce smile, I know we'll win this battle together. The next day, Mia arrives with her laptop tucked under her arm and a look in her eyes that says she means business. She pulls up a chair next to my hospital bed, opens her laptop, and looks straight at me. "Okay, Mom, let's talk strategy," she says with a determined nod. I can't help but smile at her spirit. "I've been thinking about that," I admit. "I want to be fair, but also, I want to protect myself and my future, and yours." Mia nods, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "First things first, we should get a lawyer, someone who can help us navigate the divorce smoothly." I agree. "Yes, a lawyer, and we'll need to gather all the financial documents. I've got most of them at home in the safe." "We can go through them together," Mia offers. "What about the house and the rest of the assets?" "I've been doing some math," I start, feeling the edge of the bed with my fingers. "The house. I think I'll let him have it." Mia frowns, surprised. "Really? Are you sure?" I nod firmly. I want a fresh start, somewhere new, without the memories. Plus, I've got something he doesn't know about. Her eyebrows raise in curiosity. What's that? The investment account, I say. The one my father helped me set up. It's in his name, technically, but it's mine. There's quite a bit of money there, enough for a new place and a comfortable life. Mia's eyes widen. He doesn't know about that? No, and he won't, I state. That money was from before we married. It's separate, and I want to keep it that way. Mia types away, probably making notes. Got it. We keep that account quiet. We should also think about alimony or any spousal support. I shake my head. I don't want his money, but I won't say no if it's offered. It could be useful. Okay, Mia says. And after the legal stuff is sorted? That's when I start my new life, I say, looking out the window. I want to travel, see places I've always dreamed of. When I'm well, of course. Mia reaches out and squeezes my hand. You'll get well, Mom, and I'll be right there with you wherever you go. I squeeze back, feeling a surge of gratitude for this girl. No, this woman, who's been my rock. We're in this together, I tell her, and it's more than just about the plan. It's about us, our journey ahead, and the unspoken understanding that we're a team now. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across my bed as we continue to plot, not just for the end of my marriage, but for the beginning of something new. Just the two of us, ready to face whatever comes next. A few days had passed since Mia and I had put together a plan. Lying on my hospital bed, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about setting our plan into motion. Mia walked into the room, her face flushed from the cold outside. All right, it's time, she said, sitting down beside me. Are you sure you're up for this, Mom? I nodded, the IV in my arm a stark reminder of my current weakness, but my resolve was strong. I'm sure, it's now or never. Mia took out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. I'm about to text Dad. I'll tell him that you want to discuss the divorce and that you're willing to talk settlement. That'll get his attention, I murmured, the bitterness in my voice belying my calm exterior. Mia sent the text, and we waited. It didn't take long for her phone to buzz. She read the message and looked up at me. He's biting. Wants to come over tomorrow to talk terms. I couldn't help the wry chuckle that escaped my lips. Talk terms, huh? All right. When he comes, let him believe he's in control. That's the bait. Mia frowned slightly, her concern for me clear. And you're okay with this? With him coming here and acting like he's won? I reached for her hand, my grip firmer than it had been in days. It's just an act, Mia. Remember that. We're letting him think he's won because it's the only way to get what we need from him. Mia squeezed my hand back, her own determination returning to her eyes. Okay, Mom. I trust you. And, I added, make sure he sees the safe when he comes. It's empty, but he doesn't know that. If he thinks there's something valuable in there, it'll keep him focused on the wrong thing. She nodded, making a mental note. Got it. And after he leaves? We proceed with the divorce as planned. But remember, whatever happens, don't let on about the money. That's our ace. Mia stood up, her phone in her pocket. I won't. We'll get through this, just like you said, together. As she walked out, I lay back against my pillow, closing my eyes. This was just the beginning, but I had to believe that it would lead to an end. Our end, one where Mia and I could move forward, free from the shadows of deceit that had loomed over us for far too long. The morning light crept through the blinds, casting lines across the hospital room floor. I had barely slept, thoughts whirling about the upcoming confrontation. I tried to steady my breathing, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside my bed, a constant reminder of my situation. There was a knock on the door, and Mia peeked in, her face serious. He's here, Mom. I nodded, sitting up a little straighter. Let him in. Mia opened the door, and in walked George, my soon-to-be ex-husband. He had a smirk on his face that made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. Hello, George, I said, my voice steady. Didn't expect to see you looking so alive, he sneered, taking a seat without being offered one. So, what's this about a settlement? I took a deep breath. I want to keep things simple. No dragging this out. You can have the house. His smirk widened. That's generous of you. What's the catch? No catch, I replied, meeting his gaze. I just want to end this cleanly. I'm tired, George. I don't have the energy for a fight. Mia watched, her face a mask of control. George's eyes flicked to her and then to the safe in the corner of the room. I suppose you'll be wanting support then? He asked, a greedy glint in his eyes. I shook my head slightly. No, I don't want your money. I'll manage on my own. He leaned back, looking suspicious. What's your game here? You're giving up everything. What are you hiding? Nothing to hide, I said, allowing a hint of fatigue to seep into my voice. I just want peace, George, and I think you do too. He snorted. Yeah, peace, with a young, beautiful woman waiting for me. Mia's hand clenched into a fist, but she didn't speak. I hope she makes you happy, I said quietly. George stood up, looking around the room once more. Fine, I'll have my lawyer call yours. We'll get this over with. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at me. You're a fool, you know that? Letting go of everything without a fight. I met his gaze, my own eyes clear. Maybe, but sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. George shook his head and left, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Mia rushed to my side. Are you okay, Mom? I nodded, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I'm fine, it's done. Now we just have to follow through. Mia hugged me, her presence a comfort. You're the bravest person I know. I hugged her back, allowing myself this moment of warmth. Brave? Maybe. But I'm not in this alone, am I? No, Mom, Mia whispered. Not alone, never alone. The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Mia dropped the bomb about the money. She was hesitant at first, biting her lip in that way she does when she's nervous. But I urged her on, knowing that whatever came next was just another scene in this absurd play my life had become. Dad knows about the $3 million, Mom, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, not surprised. I expected as much. What's his play? It didn't take long for him to make his move. The next day, he was at my hospital room door, his eyes wide with a mix of greed and desperation. He knelt by my bed, taking my hand in his. I've been a fool, he started, his voice trembling with feigned emotion. Please, let's put all this behind us and start over. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. It was liberating. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, deep laugh that I hadn't felt in years. Start over? I said, pulling my hand away. There's nothing to start, George. It's done. His face turned an ugly shade of red, the mask slipping. You think you can mock me? He hissed. I'll take you to court. I'll take every penny of that money. That money, I said calmly, almost enjoying this, is safely out of your reach. It's in my father's name. There's not a thing you can do about it. His eyes bulged and he spluttered, his anger a living thing between us. But before he could form words, security was at the door, alerted by the commotion. They didn't even need to speak. Their presence was enough. George's outburst was his final act, his curtain call. As they escorted him out, his shouts echoed down the hall, a pitiful sound that faded with each step. I leaned back against my pillows, a sense of peace settling over me. Mia, who had stood by the door, her face a mix of worry and anger, finally let out a long breath. Are you okay, Mom? I reached for her hand, a smile playing on my lips. I am now, sweetheart. It's truly over. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past lifting, leaving room for something new, something better. And as the door closed on the last vestige of my old life, I felt ready to face a new day. It was a clean slate, a true new beginning, and I was ready to write my own story. Life after cancer, and George felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. I bought a house with a big garden, somewhere Mia could visit whenever she wanted, a place that felt like ours, truly ours. One afternoon, Mia and I were sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching the sun dip below the trees. She had been helping me unpack boxes, turning the house into a home. Her laughter was a frequent sound here, echoing off the walls, filling spaces that had known too much silence. "You know, Mom," Mia said, her eyes scanning the yard, "I've never seen you this relaxed." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. "I have a lot to be thankful for. I beat cancer, I'm free of George, and I have you." She squeezed my hand. "I'm just glad you're finally putting yourself first. You always took care of me, even when I wasn't your responsibility." I shook my head. "You were always my responsibility, Mia. The moment I decided to be your mom, that was it. You were my family." Mia's eyes misted over, and she gave me a teary smile. "I'm glad he's out of our lives. I've never liked how he treated you, and now we don't have to deal with his drama anymore." The sun had almost set, and the sky was a canvas of purples and oranges. I stood up, feeling more alive than I had in years. "Let's go inside. I'll make us dinner, our favorite spaghetti and meatballs." She hopped up, following me into the kitchen. "Can I help?" she asked, rolling up her sleeves. "Of course. You can start by rolling the meatballs." We moved around the kitchen together, a dance we had perfected over years of cooking side by side. As I watched her hands, so much like mine, shaping the meatballs, a sense of contentment washed over me. This is what real family feels like, I thought. There were no harsh words here, no expectations or disappointments. Just me and Mia, and a future we could shape into whatever we wanted. Our laughter and the aromatic sense of our shared cooking efforts filled the kitchen, and I knew, deep down, that this was what happiness felt like. After years of just going through the motions, I was finally living, and I had the real family, my daughter, to thank for it. I'm Jane. I had just turned 28 when I thought I met the love of my life, Mike, and everything happened so fast. We were married within a year of meeting. Mike is an accountant, tall, with a laugh that could light up any room. I work in digital marketing, love to paint on weekends, and I have always been more of a planner. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. It was the day after our wedding, and our living room was piled high with wrapped presents and envelopes. There was a chaotic beauty to it all, the remnants of our celebration. That's when Mike's parents, Carol and Dave, dropped by. I hadn't really gotten to know them since we got married so quickly, but they seemed all right, normal even. As we started opening gifts, I noticed Carol and Dave were more than just a little interested in the contents. "Is that a crystal vase?" Carol asked, picking up a shimmering piece that my aunt had given us. She turned it over in her hands, eyes gleaming. "Yeah, it's from my Aunt Linda. Pretty, isn't it?" I said, trying to nudge her attention away from claiming it. Before I knew it, Carol had placed it in a separate pile to the side. "I think we can find a good place for this at our house," she said nonchalantly. Mike didn't seem to notice, busy untangling a set of fancy kitchen gadgets from his cousin. I shot him a look, hoping he'd say something. "Mom, that's our wedding gift," Mike finally said with an easy smile, as if it was all a big joke. "Oh, come on. It'll just collect dust here. We'll use it," Dave chimed in, wrapping an arm around Carol. "Besides, you two are young. You'll get plenty more gifts over the years." I tried to laugh it off with them, but it felt off. "Actually, I was thinking it would look great in our foyer," I said, attempting to claim it back without causing a scene. Carol looked at me, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Jane, you need to learn to share. We're family now, and families help each other out," she said, her tone firm, as if she was teaching me some sort of lesson. Mike, catching the tension, quickly jumped in. "Let's not worry about this now. We've got plenty of gifts, right, Jane?" I nodded, biting back my words. But as they continued to sift through the gifts, setting aside a few choice items for themselves, that uncomfortable feeling settled deep in my stomach. It was like watching strangers claim parts of my life as their own. And Mike, well, he just let them. Our first year of marriage flew by, and before I knew it, our anniversary had arrived. I wanted to make it special, a celebration of us. So I booked a table at Chez Louis, a cozy little spot we both loved. I thought it would be romantic to have Mike's parents join us, to show them they're important to us. As we sat down at the restaurant, Carol and Dave were already there, menus in hand. "This place is fancy," Carol said, eyeing the chandeliers. Mike squeezed my hand under the table, a silent "thank you" for organizing it all. The waiter came by and we started to order. I went for the salmon, Mike's favorite, and I noticed Carol's eyes darting down the menu to the most expensive items. "We'll have the lobster and the filet mignon," she declared, pointing at the priciest things without a second glance. Dave nodded in agreement. "And why not throw in a bottle of your best wine?" he added, winking at the waiter. I could feel my smile stiffening. "Quite the celebration, huh?" I tried to keep my voice light. Mike shrugged. "It's a special night," he said. "Let's not think about the cost tonight." The conversation was light for the most part, but I couldn't help but notice how Carol and Dave savored the food like it was their last meal, almost oblivious to the price tag I knew would come at the end. As we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling of being taken advantage of. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was the principle. It was our anniversary, and it felt like it was being hijacked. When the check arrived, I saw Mike's eyes widen a little, but he quickly recovered and handed his card to the waiter. On our way out, Carol looped her arm through mine. "You know, Jane, this was just lovely. We should do it again next year," she said, a satisfied smile on her face. Thanksgiving was around the corner, and with it came the start of the holiday season. Mike and I had started to decorate the house, a mix of fall colors and early Christmas cheer. It was cozy, the kind of place you'd want to come back to after a long day. One evening, as we were stringing up some lights around the living room windows, Mike's phone pinged with a message. He read it and laughed. "Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent their Christmas wish list." I was untangling another set of lights and looked up. "Wish list?" "Yeah, they send one every year. Helps with shopping," he explained, his fingers scrolling through his phone. Curiosity got the better of me. "So, what's on this famous list?" Mike hesitated, then handed me his phone. The list was extensive. Top-tier electronics, designer clothes, luxury items that they probably didn't even need. I scrolled through in disbelief. "They can't be serious," I said. "This is a lot." Mike took his phone back and shrugged. "They like the good stuff. What can I say?" I didn't know how to respond. There was a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Mike's birthday was also coming up, and I'd been so excited to give him the watch he'd been eyeing for months. Now it felt like any gift would be less about us and more about fulfilling a list. When it came to us making our list, I couldn't help but feel petty making one at all. "Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name," I suggested half-heartedly. Mike laughed. "Good one, but seriously, what do you want? You need a new laptop, right?" The holidays rolled around, and I got Carol and Dave a nice coffee maker, nothing too fancy but practical. They, in turn, gave me a set of scented candles. They were nice, but the difference was stark. I didn't say anything. Mike seemed happy with the fancy drone they got him, though. The unspoken rule was clear. We were expected to give big and receive small. It didn't feel right, but bringing it up only seemed to cause tension. So, I kept quiet, wrapping gifts and pasting on a smile for the holidays. But inside, I was beginning to count the costs, not just in dollars, but in the emotional toll this was starting to take. I was at my desk, staring at the computer screen when the email notification popped up. It was my quarterly bonus, bigger than I had expected. My first thought was to do something meaningful with it, something for Mike and me. So, I booked us a trip to Paris. We had talked about going since we met, and it felt like the perfect time to make that dream happen. That night over dinner, I told Mike about the surprise. His face lit up like I'd never seen before. "Paris? Really? Babe, that's amazing!" he exclaimed, getting up to kiss me. I was basking in the joy of the moment when his phone rang. It was his mom. I could tell by the way his face changed. "Yeah, she booked us a trip to Paris," he said into the phone, and I knew I should have asked him not to say anything just yet. Mike's enthusiasm dwindled as he listened more and more. I know you've always wanted to go." He trailed off, looking at me with a pained expression. I felt my heart sink. He hung up and there was a heavy silence. "They want to come with us," he said finally, almost like he was asking for permission. I sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, paused in midair. "To Paris? With us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah. They said they've never been and always wanted to go," Mike explained, running a hand through his hair. "I think we should take them." The room felt suddenly too small. "It's supposed to be for us, Mike. Our trip," I said, feeling a tightness in my chest. He didn't respond at first, then, "I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me." I thought about all the one-sided gift exchanges, the anniversary dinner, and every other little thing that had piled up over the past year. "But this is our time," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can plan a trip with them another time. This bonus, it's for us." Mike sighed, a deep, frustrated sound. "They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this," I said, the words like stones in my mouth. "I want us to enjoy it together, just us, like we planned." Mike didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Okay, we'll tell them some other time might work better." But when the time came to tell them, Mike's words faltered. "Look, maybe we can all go together next year," he offered, but Carol was having none of it. "Why next year? We can afford it now," she retorted over the speakerphone, her voice laced with disappointment. I couldn't take it anymore. "Because this trip is for us, Carol. Mike and I. We need this time together," I said, unable to hide my frustration. There was a pause. Then Carol said, "Well, that's very selfish of you, Jane. Very selfish indeed." After the call, the air between Mike and me was tense. He was torn, I could tell, but this was one thing I wasn't willing to budge on. Paris was meant to be a dream trip for us, and I wasn't going to let that dream be taken away. Mike became a shadow in his own home, leaving early for work and coming back late. Our conversations dwindled to monosyllables. "Dinner's in the oven," I'd say when I heard the garage door open, my voice echoing off the empty walls. "Thanks," he'd reply, a hollow word that hung in the air between us. I missed him, missed us. I yearned for the easy days when we'd dream together on the couch, our plans and laughter intertwined. I longed to reach out to him, to break through the invisible barrier that had erected itself after the argument over Paris. But every attempt felt like speaking through a thick glass wall. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him. One particularly hard evening, I sat at the dinner table across from Mike, the sound of his fork against the plate drilling into the silence. I cleared my throat. "Mike, this can't go on," I started, my voice barely above a whisper, fearful of shattering the fragile peace. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence be the new normal for us." Mike continued to eat, his expression unreadable. Then he set down his fork, a sign that I had his attention, even if just for a moment. "What do you want me to say, Jane?" he asked, a hint of weariness seeping through. "I want to understand why you're taking this so hard, why it feels like you're choosing them over me," I replied, the hurt evident in my tone. He sighed, his hands folded in front of him. "They're my parents, Jane. They've been hoping to go to Paris their whole lives." "And what about what we've been hoping for? Our plans? Our dreams?" My own frustration started to bubble up, words becoming more pointed, desperate to bridge the gap between us. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation I'd come to recognize. I know," he said, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of the man I married, conflicted and torn, but not indifferent. "It's just, they've always been there for me. I feel obligated, you know." "But where does that leave us, Mike?" I pressed, leaning forward, trying to catch his eye. "What about our marriage?" He didn't respond right away, and in that pause, I felt a wave of fear. Fear that maybe we weren't as solid as I had believed, that maybe the foundation we had built was less rock and more sand, easily eroded by the steady tide of his parents' needs and wants. "It's supposed to be us against the world, Mike, not me against you and them," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. "I know, Jane. I just don't know how to make everyone happy." "That's just it," I said, a sudden clarity washing over me. We can't always make everyone happy. But we made vows to each other, Mike. Doesn't that count for something?" He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the table before finding mine. "It does. It counts for a lot." The rest of the meal passed in a contemplative silence, a change from the strained quiet that had become our norm. It was as if my words had planted a seed, or perhaps watered one that had been lying dormant within Mike all this time. The morning sun poured in through the windows, but the warmth it usually brought seemed to have no place in our home today. I woke up to an eerie quiet, the other side of the bed untouched from the night before. The emptiness of the house felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its silence. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, expecting the usual absence of messages, given the silent treatment that had taken residence in our home. Instead, my screen was flooded with notifications, all from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I read the details. Multiple transactions, including airline tickets and a pair of hotel bookings in Paris, all made while I was asleep. The timestamps on the emails told me the flight would have left hours ago. Mike and his parents were already on their way to Paris, using my hard-earned bonus to fund a trip I was meant to be on. Disbelief turned to anger, and then to a crushing sense of betrayal. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand as the reality settled in. Mike had access to my account. I'd trusted him implicitly, never imagining he would abuse that trust. Yet, here it was in stark black and white, a digital paper trail of deceit. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had believed would stand by me had chosen his own comfort over our relationship. I thought back to all the times I'd brushed aside the little signs, the excuses I'd made for him, for us. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, knowing full well he wouldn't answer. Not with the time difference, not with my previous ultimatum ringing in his ears. "Mike," I began, the beep of the voicemail almost mocking in its cheerfulness. "I saw the charges. You took your parents to Paris with my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything." The house felt even emptier after the call, the walls closing in on me with the weight of everything unsaid, and now, perhaps, never to be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. They had left, just like that, with no regard for me or the life we were supposed to be building together. I canceled the hotel rooms, the return flights, every piece of the trip that was connected to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt a piece of my old life fall away, the future I'd envisioned evaporating before my eyes. By the time I was done, there was nothing left to do but act. I contacted the bank and removed Mike's access to my accounts, a finality in each click that felt both terrifying and liberating. The man I had married, the family I had tried to be a part of, they were all just strangers now. Strangers who had used me, who had seen my generosity as something to exploit rather than cherish. I packed my bags with a robotic efficiency, each item a reminder of a dream I had to put away. There was no going back from this, no gentle words or apologies that could mend the rift that his betrayal had caused. Mike had chosen his path, and in doing so, he had set me on mine. The ring I'd once worn with pride lay cold and heavy in my palm. I set it down on the counter, its sparkle mocking in the morning light, and with one last look at the life I was leaving behind, I closed the door on the house that was never truly a home. It was late afternoon when I finally left the house. My car was packed with clothes and essentials, a stark reminder of the sudden turn my life had taken. As I drove, the messages began to flood in. One from Mike, several from his mother. I pulled over to read them, knowing they'd only fuel the fire of my resolve. Mike's message read, "Jane, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" His words seemed hollow, almost insulting in their simplicity. I started to type a response, then stopped. No words would bridge the chasm between us. His mother's messages were a mix of confusion and anger. "What's going on? Why have you canceled our rooms? Call me." I imagined her sitting in a cafe in Paris, expecting luxury and finding complication. I turned the phone off. They were in the middle of a trip funded by deceit. They could figure it out. My first stop was the bank. I needed to ensure my finances were completely secure. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a gentle face, greeted me. "I need to make sure all my accounts are locked down. My husband, he won't have access anymore," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. "Of course," she nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "Let's make sure you're protected." By the time I left the bank, my accounts were secure, and a new sense of determination settled within me. I drove to my sister's house, the only place I felt I could go. She opened the door before I could even knock. "Jane, I've been so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug. I allowed myself a moment to just be held, to let the reality of my situation be shared. "I can't believe he would do this to you," she said as we sat down at her kitchen table. "You deserve so much better." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I do, and that's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything. I've left the house. I'm done, Sarah." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" I looked around the familiar room, feeling the first twinge of relief. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting with a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me." Sarah's face was a mixture of anger and pride. "I'll support you however I can. Do you need a lawyer?" "I'll find one," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "I need someone who doesn't know Mike or his family. I need this cut clean." The conversation shifted as Sarah helped me unpack my car and make plans for the next few days. There was a strange comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding in the midst of chaos. I was standing in the kitchen at my sister's house, a mug of coffee warming my hands when my phone vibrated with a persistence that felt all too familiar. It was Mike, again. "Jane, we need to talk. I'm sorry, I miss you, and I think we can work things out." His text read, a mixture of apology and plea. I sighed, the same rehearsed, "I'm sorry," becoming a threadbare blanket that no longer provided comfort or warmth. "Not this time, Mike," I muttered under my breath, typing a response that left no room for ambiguity. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." I could almost hear the desperation in the silence that followed, but it wasn't enough to make me reconsider. Not anymore. My resolve was tested further when, a few days later, Mike's parents made a dramatic appearance at my sister's doorstep. Their faces were twisted in anger as they barged past Sarah, who stood wide-eyed at the door. "You've got some nerve, Jane," his mother exclaimed, her voice shrill. "You ruined our family vacation. You're just a greedy, selfish woman." Sarah stepped between us, her stance protective. "That's enough! You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister." The argument escalated until the neighbors peeked out of their windows, and I was sure someone would call the police. It ended with Sarah threatening to do just that if they didn't leave. Their departure left a sour air that lingered long after they were gone. But amidst the chaos, a realization settled within me. I was truly done. The divorce process was a cold, legal ballet, and I danced my part, signing papers and nodding through explanations of settlements and divisions. But with each stroke of the pen, I felt a chain breaking, a tether loosening. And then it was over. I stood outside the courthouse, a free woman. The air was crisp, a gentle wind playing with the loose strands of my hair. Sarah hugged me tight, her support unwavering. "You did it, Jane," she whispered, pride evident in her voice. I had done it. I had stood up to the selfishness that tried to claim me, stood firm against the manipulation that sought to keep me bound. I turned away from the courthouse, away from a past that no longer held me. The messages from Mike continued for a while, a mix of apologies, bargaining, and eventually anger. But they went unread, floating in the digital void as I moved forward with my life. The apartment I rented was small, but bathed in sunlight. I filled it with plants, books, and new memories. I went back to school, enrolling in classes that fueled a passion for learning that I'd neglected. And one quiet evening, as I sat on my little balcony, a cup of tea in hand, I deleted Mike's number from my phone. I was free. Free to heal, free to grow, and most importantly, free to be unapologetically me.